Yeah, this is something else I did on this car. This is actually the this right here. This is the cradle where there's the center motor mounts. There's one in the front and one in the rear. Okay. Now there's also one on the passenger side, and there's also the transmission mount or engine mount, whatever you call it, on the driver's side. Now this is the cradle that it sits in. You don't need to replace this whole part. You just need to do the inserts. Now it's bolted in the back, and there's a trick I did with this that a lot of people don't do, and you can probably see it partly in here. They're filled up with some urethane windshield adhesive, and I'll tell you a reason why I do that. But it's not super difficult to take out these motor mounts. It requires a lot of hammering to get the inserts out with a chisel, and I'll explain something on this a little bit further. But this trick I'm going to tell you is actually what I really want to get into on this. You obviously have to take out that center bolt, and the radiator support has to come down. Alright, that's the radiator support right here. These two bolts have to come out. This whole radiator support comes down. You don't have to disconnect like the radiator itself. You don't have to disconnect any of the hoses or anything like that. You don't have to disconnect the transmission line, but the radiator has to come down a few inches to get out the cradle from the top. Now on the top here, this is this thing in the center right here. That's the top of the radiator. You know, it's built right into the radiator, and the whole thing will turn counterclockwise to the left about a quarter turn, and that, in other words, if you want to line it up, you want to like actually take these out when you're pushing the radiator up, and then put them back in, and they'll turn about a quarter turn and lock it in place. In other words, right here, this is like the top of the radiator itself, this little circle in the middle, and this whole thing holds this in place. So when you're pushing the radiator back up, you want to like take this out. In other words, you turn it this way, counterclockwise about a quarter of a turn, and then the thing comes out. When you push the radiator up, there'll be like a big hole, you know, in the frame right here. Then you put these things back on. You just put it this way and you turn it this way, and it locks it in place. It's kind of a simple thing. As far as the motor mounts, this is what I did to the motor mount itself. This is maybe not a perfectly clear picture. What I did was I filled them up with urethane windshield adhesive. Urethane windshield adhesive, and there's a reason for that, because these mounts typically break. They're too soft, and you know the factory has them that way so the engine stays a little bit more steady in the car, but I can't tell the difference. But when I did this, these things are like one piece of solid rubber, and there's two inserts. There's one on the front and one on the rear of the cradle, and you have to hammer them out. Here's a close-up of it, of a replacement part. So you notice they're all hollowed out, right? And so what I did was I used brake cleaner, clean this up really good, let it dry. After it dries, clean it up really good so the rubber's like chemically clean, and then I'd fill this up with urethane windshield adhesive, then let it dry for a couple days, and then it's like one piece of solid rubber. Because typically what happens is these things all like break inside, and they don't seem to last that long. I don't know why. I think I know why they make them that way, because it's a consumer perception. Like, in other words, when they're getting rated, when the car is new, when the car is being rated by these consumer groups and people out there doing reviews, they say, well, the engine is smoother, you know, so that's why they make these such soft rubber. But I can't tell the difference. But now when they're filled up with windshield urethane sealant, this thing will not break. Now something else, you notice you can buy the inserts, and these will, like, in other words, you would hammer this whole insert into the cradle itself after you take out the old insert. And they're pretty difficult to get out. You have to use like a 3-pound hammer. But What you have to do though, what a lot of times on that cradle itself where this goes in, I'll file the edge of the metal so there's like a little bit of a taper going inward, and that helps to start this a lot easier. That's a little trick too. And the stuff I used was this junk right here. You know, I used a 3M auto glass urethane windshield adhesive, and just fill this stuff up inside those mounts up, and that should last. They shouldn't break anymore because they don't seem to last that long. I mean, if you look at most of the Sebring convertibles, those mounts seem like they're busted, and I really can't fault the car company about that, because what's going on is they're trying to please the customer and the people that review their cars, so they make them too soft so the car seems like it's smoother, but it's to me it's not a very good way of doing things, but that's just how it works. But yeah, this is how I filled it up. You know, I've just filled it up solid. It's one solid piece of rubber and urethane, and they're not going to break anymore. So that is a little tip that I did on the car. Sorry I couldn't show like what I did as I changed it, but this is really the tip itself of how a very good idea, I think, and they'll probably never break again.